I very much enjoy watching the Planet Earth series that BBC has produced over the years. It's some fantastic cinematography of animals and their habitats and their practices and so forth. And I was chastised once for watching them because they're narrated by a man who would have nothing to do with the living God, of course, and attributes all of this to some sort of evolutionary process. But if you just sort of turn the volume off and not listen to him, the rest of it actually is quite amazing. And the kinds of things that you learn from seeing all these different creatures, knowing that our God is infinitely creative, both on land and in the sea, is a remarkable thing. So I say that to you this morning because we come today now to the next part of God's speech as he is speaking to Job and Job's friends and making the point to which this book belongs. And right now we are in the middle of the first half of this speech. Yes, I realize it's taken me many sermons to get just to the first half of the speech, but as I've said many times, when God speaks, we should pay attention. And so here we are. As I said, this speech is actually in two parts. The first half is in chapters 38 and 39, where God asks Job a series of rhetorical questions that don't require an answer, about what he has created and whether or not Job was involved in that process along the way. Was he a part of all that? It's designed, you remember, to show us the sovereignty of God over the created order, over all things that have been formed. So far then in this first half, God has asked two primary questions. Number one, where were you, O Job, when I, the Creator, established the foundations of the world, when I spoke matter into existence, and the angelic audience shouted for joy at the order and the beauty and the glory and purpose in it all? Where were you? Where were you? And then secondly, can you, O Job, can you, like me, the Creator, set the boundaries of the sea? Can you command the morning to be separated from the night, from the darkness? Can you set the sun and the moon and the stars in motion? Can you control the weather? I suppose God was even asking, can you even predict the weather? Notice it's a series of rapid-fire questions shot there at Job, each one designed to keep Job off balance. It's designed to keep Job from responding in his puny nature as a creature. That's the point. The point is to God to say to him, you weren't there, you weren't there, you were not there, you do not understand. In other words, it's the sarcastic display of God. I love the way he says it in 38:21. You know, for you were born then, right? I mean, that's clear sarcasm. It's like, you weren't there, you weren't born, which clearly demonstrates that finite men, meaning those born in time and space, have nothing on the eternal one, the one not born in time and space, the one who's always been. You have nothing, dear Job. And so God has been sending these questions at Job about his role in creating the world. But now, as we approach the second half of the first half of the speech, God will come now to question Job about his role, Job's role, in creating the animal kingdom. 38:39 through 40:30. Now, as I have been pointing out, there's a parallel between God's speech and the creation narrative that you see in Genesis chapter 1. So what we see here is God turning his attention to day 6 of the creation narrative, the establishment of land animals. You remember that sea creatures and birds, and I would suggest insects as well, even though they're not mentioned, but they are flying little creatures, right? Probably created along with the birds on day 5 That's Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 to 23. So we're moving past day 5 to day 6. Now, in my ever so humble opinion, I think whoever put the chapter breaks in the Bible messed up here. Chapter 39 should really begin at verse 39 of chapter 38, because there's a switch from that discussion of the natural order to a discussion of the animal kingdom. So if we ever get a chance to move the chapter breaks, I'm going to lobby that we move this one here. So 38:39 becomes 39:1. But I also want to point out as well that although there is an analogy to Genesis chapter 1, and we've been looking at that, it's by no means perfect, okay? God is not limited by the creation narrative story and has to go along that way, because he will bring in some things that are not consistent with that story, as you will see. And that's okay. God's free to do that, right? All right. Now, I want to offer you two observations of the passage we're about to look at. First, God is going to refer here to 10 different animals, 6 land animals and 4 birds. Now, it's 6 to 4, but it becomes 7 to 3 if you consider the ostrich to be more of a land animal than a bird, right? He doesn't fly, but I'll leave that up to you. God is going to use here all forms of creatures that inhabit dry land. Dry land. I'm going to say where men also live. Okay. This is God coming to Job and saying, "Let me talk about the creatures I created that inhabit the same space you do." All right. So this isn't going to be a discussion of the myriad of diversity that we find in the sea. God passes over that and comes to the land animals instead. And he will include birds in that, which is why this narrative parallel isn't exactly right, because Genesis 5, day 5 is the birds, day 6 is the land animals. So he doesn't do this quite perfectly, but you get the point, right? He will also use both wild animals, on the one hand, like lions, and then domesticable animals like horses at the same time. So he will compare 2 different kinds of animals in this discussion. So he's going to use all different kinds, even including birds which inhabit dry land, and those that are wild and those that can be domesticated. So he's going to mix it all up. But his point is to demonstrate that even in the animal kingdom, over which man has been given dominion, there is still much Job does not know or understand about the relationship of animals to humans. The relationship of animals to humans. In other words, even as a creature himself, Job, bound to the earth with the animals, because we are, right? But not as one of them, meaning distinct from them, and having the power even to take dominion over them, even to the point of domesticating them as needed, much of the animal world still eludes our understanding, eludes Job's understanding of things. That's going to be God's point. In fact, one of the reasons, I'll offer a reason here why I think there is a certain amount of mystery involved in the understanding of the animal kingdom. It's found in Genesis chapter 9, that after Noah and his family came forth out of the ark, God placed a fear into the animal kingdom of man. The implication being that that fear didn't exist prior to the flood. You see it in Genesis 9:2. I do think it also has to do with the fact that God gave Noah and his family permission at this point to eat animals. You see that. In fact, I think that the reason why there's a prohibition against man killing man, and the reason why God elicits the death penalty for man killing man, is because what God is really saying is you're free to eat any of the animals, you're just not free to eat each other. Okay? I think that's the point. So this fear, this natural fear that now exists in the animal kingdom, and more specifically a fear of us, is because God put that. And thus we have this mysterious sense in which there's a lot of the animal world that we really don't know about. I mean, if you think about those cameramen that are filming these BBC pictures, they're hiding. They're having to sneak up and shoot from a distance because, trust me, you're not just going to walk into the Pride of Lions and set a camera there and say, okay, guys, let me do an interview. Not going to happen. So this fear leaves much of animal life as mysterious to us. So our first observation is in that sense. But the second is one I also need you to think about. And this is the second observation that's, I think, one that we know, but we don't really talk about too much. And that is that the various realities, the various living realities of animals is based largely on instinct. It's based largely on instinct. Now, you know that instinct is the ingrained, not taught, the ingrained ability to survive. It's the genetic makeup through which animals can find food, avoid predators, and reproduce their species. God, you remember when he created the animal kingdom in Genesis chapter 1, verses 21 and 24, said that the animals would procreate according to their kind, each animal procreating with itself in order to establish that particular species, on and on. Okay, so instinct is that which is built into animals in order for them to survive. Now, it is true that if you watch these shows, you discover that many animals learn, and I'm putting that in quotes, they will learn certain things from their parents, but not in the human way. And it's not a rational thought against experience. In other words, there's one I really like about these birds that are nesting way high up in these cliffs. And at some point, the little ones have to jump out and float all the way to the sea. And it's a long ways. And if they don't make it, they're going to hit the ground and go boing, 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 boing. And then the little foxes that are waiting for them down there are going to consume them. Okay. Well, their parents are not teaching them the idea of flying. You don't see mama bird and they're going, okay, here's what we're going to do. All right. Now you're going to spread your wings out. All right. And then I'm going to teach you how to balance that right. Okay. Get the aerodynamics. It's just exactly right now. Okay. There's instinct there. The bird knows how to do that. The parents teach them in the sense the parents fly out and the bird sees, the little one sees that and goes, oh yeah, oh, I can do that. That's what we call instinct. God, however, chose to give human beings, by virtue of the Imago Dei, the ability to learn in the true intellectual sense and not have to rely on instinct. Now, it is true that we do possess some rudimentary forms of instinct, but they're extremely rudimentary. They're self-preservation more than anything else. You touch something hot, your natural reaction is to lift your hand away. Okay, that's instinctual in the sense that it's a self-preservation. But I doubt there's anybody here who's going to let their 3-year-old try to drive their car. Even though they've watched their parents drive the car and they probably could figure it out. But every time you've heard of a 3 to a 5-year-old getting into a car and trying to drive it, what's the news report? Some sort of disaster, right? So we are not creatures made with instinct. We are creatures that God has given the ability to think and to rationally understand. We can teach our child how to drive so that when he is old enough and capable enough and mature enough to actually get behind the wheel of a 7,000-pound thing and drive it, they can, because they learn how and they have to be taught. There's a difference. So very often the mysteriousness of animals is in this instinctual behavior. We don't get it. We don't understand why it is that they operate, because they operate on a very different level than we do. Their behaviors are often, in many ways, beyond our understanding. We don't get it. Emperor penguins sit there The male emperor penguins, okay? Guys, you really want to love your wife? Here it goes, right? They take the egg from the mother and set it on their feet and stand there with the egg on their feet while the moms go back to the ocean to find food. And they stand there together with an egg on top of their feet for months while the temperature drops to 30 and 40 below zero outside. Explain that. There's no way to. They operate in ways that are beyond our comprehension. That's part of the point that God is making to Job here. We as humans live in a very different reality than animals do, which is why I completely reject the idea that we're just another species of animal on this planet. We do not possess those kinds of instinctual realities that all other creatures possess. So God is going to go through here and he's going to speak to Job by asking him questions about various animals, and he's going to ask questions of Job about these various animals. And so here we go. Chapter 38, verse 39, which is technically 39:1. Can you hunt the prey for the lion or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in their thicket? Who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry to God for help and wander about for lack of food? Now let me just point out something, that neither of these two animals can truly be domesticated, right? You really can't domesticate a lion. Oh, they've tried. And sometimes it doesn't turn out too well. Ask the two guys in Vegas who had a couple, it didn't work out so good for them. You see, both of these creatures seek out their food instinctively. They seek out what they need, and it's mysterious to us in many ways. It's mysterious to us how they do this, how they're able to do this. For example, in the realities of this world, animals spend most of their time hunting for food. They do. Yet much still eludes us as to the complexities of the food chain itself. We still don't fully understand how this creature becomes the food for this one, and then this one, and this one, and this one, and sometimes there's branches that we don't really quite understand at all. In fact, when we try to mess with it, we usually just mess it up. We usually just make it into something worse. So God comes to Job in these few verses and he says, "Oh, Job, can you get the lion or the raven, or any wild animal for that matter, what they need to survive? Can you do it? Do you have the ability to hunt for the lion? Do you possess his instinctive wit as to how to chase down a wildebeest and take it down? Can you do that?" Of course, the answer is no. In other words, Job, you can barely keep your own food supply. How do you dare question me, the one who provides food for you from every kind of animal? How can you question me when I provide for you everything? Notice verse 41. Who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry to God for help? You see, God's taking the credit there for getting the raven his food, and he's saying to Job, they don't come crying to you. They won't even consider coming to you, but they will come to me. So, can you provide for these creatures? Moving on, chapter 39, verse 1. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the does? There's probably two animals there. Can you number the months that they fulfill? Meaning from the time they first are pregnant to the time they have their child, right? Can you number them? Do you know the time when they give birth? Now notice he's talking about mountain goats here. When they crouch, bring forth their offspring, and are delivered of their young. Do you know when that is? Verse 5. Who has let the wild donkey go free? Who has loosed the bonds of the swift donkey? To whom have I given the arid plain for his home, and the salt land for his dwelling place? In other words, like the seeking of food, the methods of reproduction in the animal kingdom and the places where animals live and raise their young is largely mysterious to humans. Question: how in the world, why in the world, did these penguins choose to live in that place? Right? Why did they choose to live there? What made them decide that that was the place that they were going to survive? And I mean, it seems to be the least likely place to choose from an evolutionary perspective, doesn't it? I mean, if you believe that all these animals, as Richard Attenborough does, that these creatures are simply nothing more than evolution over time, why in the world did they choose that particular place? Now, I will offer you a suggestion. There was a time on this planet when Antarctica was lush and green. That was before the flood. See, we don't really understand this because reproduction is one of the most significant time activities of animals, just like finding food. Unlike us. Now, it is true that humans do possess some innate desire to bear children. We're seeing less and less of that in our culture as we go along, in all of Western culture, in fact. But the need to reproduce is not instinctual. It's not an instinctual drive as it is within us, like it is with animals. We don't find ourselves every year at the same time swimming up the same stream to find a wife, right? It's not something innate to us. Having children is very different for humans than it is for animals. So God comes to Job, and once again he asks the question, "Oh Job, do you truly understand how the mountain goat or deer reproduce? Can you explain why the animals of the world live and breed where they do? Can you explain that?" In fact, you can almost hear God say, "Look, you can barely keep a line of domesticated animals going. How can you question the one who keeps all the animals of the world reproducing after their own kind in service to you? How can you know this? Can you? No." 39, verse 9. "Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind him in the furrow with ropes, or will he harrow the valleys after you? Will you depend on him because his strength is great? And will you leave to him your labor?" Verse 13. "The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but they are the pinions and plumage of love. But are they the pinions and plumage of love? For she leaves her eggs to the earth and lets them be warmed on the ground, forgetting that a foot may crush them and that the wild beast may trample them. She deals cruelly with her young as if they were not hers. Though her labor be in vain, yet she has no fear, because God has made her forget wisdom and given her no share in understanding. When she rouses herself to flee, she laughs at the horse and his rider." Now, just an observation here. You know the axiom, dumb as an ox? Have you heard that? Anybody familiar with that phrase? Dumb as an ox. All the old people put their hands up. All the young people go, "Ah." Okay. Dumb as an ox is actually a very ancient axiom. It traces its roots all the way back to at least the 13th century. Thomas Aquinas was called a dumb ox, okay, because he was a big, lumbering man. Extremely intelligent, but a big, lumbering man. So they called him a dumb ox as sort of a play on words, ridicule of the man. It's a slow, lumbering animal, being less intelligent, even though farmers have suggested oxen are actually very smart. But it's the picture, right? It's the dumb ox. It's in this case where God says, the wild ox, unlike the domesticated one, okay, so this is talking about the wild oxen, is pictured as a big, brutish animal, one that cannot be trained to serve a master. In other words, its great strength actually precludes it from being trained for farming. So that's the first half of it. Additionally, then, the ostrich is well known for being just a hair on the slow side. Okay? Being intellectually slow and yet physically very fast. In verses 14 to 16, God describes her reproduction process, right? She buries her eggs in the sand, but she doesn't protect them there. She puts them in the sand, she walks away, she leaves them there. And in verse 17, God says that he made her forget wisdom and have no share in understanding, okay? She has a brain the size of a walnut. Okay, so you got this huge body and this tiny little brain way up on the top of this very long neck and this tiny little head with these gigantic eyes and this tiny little brain inside. He has made her dumb. He has made her dumb. But yet, in verse 18, God notes that she can outrun a horse, which is true. An ostrich can achieve average speed over ground of 43 miles an hour. Two legs, going very fast, 43 miles an hour. A horse, 30, 35, tops. And he can't really maintain 30 to 35 for very long before he becomes winded. He can outrun her. That's what God means when he says, when she rouses herself to flee, she laughs at the horse and his rider. In other words, what you see here is God pointing to two different animals who appear dumb. One actually dumb, the other one maybe not. Yet, both are beyond the ability of human beings to truly domesticate. They remain functionally unusable to us except as food. Ostriches are widely farmed all over the world, but they cannot be trained to help with the production of food itself. Ostrich hamburgers are delicious. I've had one years ago, yeah. Red meat looks like beef. In fact, when they served it to me, they didn't tell me what it was. I ate it. Tasted like, an excellent cheeseburger. When it was done, they told me it was ostrich. I went, cool. But they cannot be trained to help with farming. I mean, this walnut-sized brain isn't going to be able to pull a plow. Might have great strength and great speed, but it's not going to do anything for us. So in other words, God comes to Job and he says, "Oh, Job, can you train the wild oxen or the ostriches to serve you? Can you change their lack of intelligence and use it to your benefit?" In fact, it's like God coming to Job and saying, you struggle with the animals I have granted you for domestication. Like horses. How can you question the one who has purposed every animal, whether smart or dumb, for you? How can you know? Which leads us to the next one. Verse 19. Do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like the locust? His majestic snorting is terrifying. By the way, I'm skipping the locust as a part of the process and numbering of the animals because he's an analogy here. Okay. He paws in the valley and exalts in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. He does not turn back from the sword. Upon him rattle the quiver, the flashing spear, and the javelin. With fierceness and rage he swallows the ground. He cannot stand still at the sound of the trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of the captains, and the shouting. Have you, O Job, given the horse his great strength and the ability to serve without fear? God paints a picture here of an animal, of a horse, who is not afraid of war. See it? A creature that's not afraid of war between humans. Four things to notice. Verse 21. He goes out to meet the weapons. He carries the soldier into battle. Verse 22, he does not turn from the sword. He's not afraid of the weapons being brought to bear against the soldier he carries. He's not afraid of them. Number 3, upon him, that means literally upon him, rattle the quiver, the flashing spear, and the javelin. He carries the weapons for the soldier riding upon him, and he does so without fear or question. And number 4, he cannot stand still at the sound of the trumpet. 24 and 25. He's willing to charge even into battle at the command of his rider. He carries the rider, he carries the weapons, and he's not afraid of what is coming against him, and he charges into battle. That's the horse that God paints. In other words, the horse is a uniquely gifted, domesticable animal. Probably unlike any other animal, the horse is the true servant of humans, even in the face of that which threatens to kill him and his rider. It's an animal that can be trained to run into battle rather than to flee from it in danger. You can train a horse to run into a battle. You see it in movies all the time, don't you? Soldiers on horseback, right into the battle. The horse is an unparalleled animal in the service of mankind. Horses have probably been domesticated from about the 4th millennium BC. And when is that? Thousands of years even before Job. They've been used for farming. They've been used for transportation. They've been used for cattle ranching and for sporting. It is highly likely that Job had some in his possession. Doesn't seem to be any reason to believe otherwise. In fact, horses in the Old Testament were a measure of status and wealth. Solomon had 40,000 horses, according to 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 26. And very often he bartered with the nations around him by virtue of his horses. He used them as a form of payment. Today, even we still think of the horse, even though we don't use horses much anymore in our modern technology, and yet we still trace much of what we talk about in terms of technology to horses. Your car's engine is measured in horsepower. So God comes to Job and he says, "Oh, Job, have you given the horse his great strength? Or his very unique ability to serve man? Have you given him that? Do you truly understand this animal, willing to run into mortal danger on your behalf? A creature that you can climb on and ride into battle. Do you understand that? In other words, you don't even understand the uniqueness of the horse as a creature in the animal kingdom and how he can be domesticated. If that's the case, how can you question the one who made this magnificent animal as your servant?" Verse 26. "Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads his wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the rock he dwells and makes his home, on the rocky crag and stronghold. From there he spies out the prey. His eyes behold it from far away. His young ones suck up blood where the slain are, there he is." In this particular speech, then, God ends his rapid-fire questioning of Job by turning to two different birds. Now, this is different than the ostrich that we saw up above, right? It's going to be a different sort of examination than that. He brings before Job two birds of prey. Two birds of prey. Now, birds are typically carnivorous, but these are highly specialized carnivores. And they use height as both a living space and as a tool for hunting prey. Not only are they creatures that can fly, but they're creatures that use height as the means by which they hunt their prey. In Kansas, if you're driving anywhere, you will see hawks sitting up on top of telephone poles. And what are they doing? They're looking in the fields for mice. They're observing for the movement of mice down below. And what do? They then soar from that height down, and they become instruments of death from above. They bring their talons to bear against that creature on the ground down below. They use height as a tool for hunting prey. They are creatures that can fly and use height in this way. In other words, they possess an ability unknown amongst humans. They possess an ability unknown amongst humans. Yet, existing in birds, insects, some mammals, and even angels. Okay, we got creatures that can fly. Okay, so we got creatures like birds and insects that can fly. Some mammals can fly. And we know that angels fly. Now let's be clear, when we talk about angels flying, we're not talking about physical locomotion here. We're talking about simply as moving in the spiritual realm. Okay, it's not the same thing, but it's flight in a sense. In other words, creatures possessing a nature of which we are often jealous. How many of you have dreams that you can fly? And then find yourself waking up just as you crash. Common human experience. Why? Because it's an ability we do not possess. Right? We make up fictional characters who can. Right? We create fictional characters who have the ability to fly, right? Because that's one of the things we don't have. We look at birds and we go, wouldn't that be kind of cool? You know, it'd be great to just fly instead of driving my car. So we invented flight technologically, but even that's a royal pain because you have to go through some sort of screening process to get on board this device that will take you to the next place. And you certainly don't want to do it at Thanksgiving or Christmas, right? So here God comes to Job, and he says to Job, "Oh, Job, do you understand what it means to fly? Are you jealous of the animal that I formed below you in the pecking order because of his ability which you do not possess?" Isn't that interesting? The animals are created in the kingdom below us as humans, and yet God gave to some of those creatures the ability to fly, the ability to move about without being trapped with gravity to the ground. In other words, you can almost see God saying to him, since you have no idea how to use the atmosphere to move around from place to place, and you won't have that for another at least 4,000 years, how can you question the one who gave this creature such an ability, yet considers you infinitely more important than him? How can you question me, the one who produced these animals below you, gave some the ability to fly, which you wind up being jealous of all the time, and yet considers you infinitely more important than them? I'll quote to you from our Lord himself in Matthew chapter 6, right? Verse 25. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on it. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Interesting, isn't it? You're all worried about what you're going to eat and drink. You're all worried about what you're going to, how you're going to get along in this world, what tomorrow may bring. The birds flit from place to place. They have no concern about tomorrow. It's only about today. They eat and they fly around finding food, but they don't store it. They just eat it. Some do have some rudimentary storage, but it's trivial. And yet God considers them far less important than you without the ability to fly. You see, here's the reality to think about from all of these animals that God puts before us here. Here's the reality I want you to think about. God has established the animal kingdom as a fierce and difficult realm. A fierce and difficult realm. One that we as humans do not have to navigate. The animal kingdom can best be described as eat or be eaten. Right? That's how it is. Eat or be eaten. There's a constant instinctual struggle to find food, to keep from becoming food, and reproducing your kind, over against overwhelming odds of success. The animal kingdom really only survives by virtue of volume. I saw one of these BBC presentations just the other day about monarch butterflies. I don't know where they were, but they hang in trees during the wintertime. They huddle together high up in the trees, and the trees are covered with them. I mean, we're talking about billions of them in the trees. And then when the storms come through, the storms will blow these insects to the ground and they will die. And in certain years, 75% of the monarchs in the trees die during the winter. 75%. And yet in the spring, when it warms up, they begin to leave the trees and fly. And it's this massive swarm. Hundreds of millions of them in the sky. They have pictures of it. If you get a chance to watch that particular, I would encourage it. It's unbelievable. The trees are just loaded with these, and then all of a sudden, boom, they all just take off in this huge swarm. It's just unbelievable. Yet the ground is littered with 75% of them that have died. It's a world of constant struggle. It's a world of constant difficulty. If you're not finding food, you're becoming food to somebody else. And reproducing your kind is over against extraordinary odds. Those emperor penguins that are standing on the ice with that one little egg, if that egg slips off the foot of the penguin and lands on the ice for more than a few seconds, the chick inside will die. He's got to hang on to that egg above ground, above the ice, for 9 months. That's overwhelming odds, isn't it? And most don't make it. But we live in a different world, don't we? We live in a very different world. We are at the top of the so-called food chain. Now, again, I don't believe that humans are in the food chain. That's part of the animal kingdom. But we do not struggle with or against these forces. The Creator has given us a very different kind of world. One that is significantly easier and far more fulfilling than what the animal kingdom experiences. You see, let me paint the picture like this. None of you need to worry when you leave this building about going out to your car that a giant bird is going to swoop down and grab you and send you off to a nest somewhere. Okay? There is no Kraken. Okay? We don't worry about that kind of stuff, do we? We don't worry about being food for someone else. That's all part of the sci-fi world that we have built most of the time in sort of an anti-human discussion, an anti-human perspective in reality. We are living in a very different world than our animal friends do. Our day-to-day difficulties, our day-to-day problems are nowhere as difficult as those experienced every minute by animals. I enjoy watching the birds out these windows here. During the week when you're not here, I will come in here and pray and preach and yell at the walls about some of you. And then, just kidding. But I like watching the birds. They will often come in here and peck away at the ground, and You look out the window. They can't see me because of the tint on the windows. You could stand right there. They'll come right up to the door. But the moment that they sense even the slightest bit of danger, boom, they're all gone. Just like that. That's not our life, is it? That's not our life. We don't sit there and worry about every little thing that comes along. Some of you do, but no. God has given us a very different reality than what He has given to animals. He has given us a very different reality about how to survive. Now, I do agree that sometimes we do struggle with matters of life and death. Yes. As human beings, yes, we struggle with various things related to survival. Certain diagnoses, for example, become a matter of life and death for us, yes. But that is the exception, not the rule, isn't it? The vast majority of our lives are not this kind of thing of wondering where our next meal is going to come from and wondering whether or not we're going to be eaten or wondering whether or not we can reproduce. I mean, the simple fact is, isn't it, that as human beings, reproduction for us is most often a matter of choice, isn't it? We can choose to, and we can choose not to. Most of the time. Now, I realize there are exceptions to that, sometimes heartbreaking exceptions to that. But for the vast majority of human beings that have lived on this planet, we don't spend our time pondering, we don't spend our lives trying to figure out how we're going to reproduce the next generation. We make those decisions intellectually. We choose those things. So we're not living as those that are in an instinctual world where we're trying desperately to figure out where our next thing is going to be. In fact, most of human life, if you think about it, most of human life grants us the opportunity to actually ponder greater things than where our next meal is coming from. I mean, here we have an excellent example in a book where Job, who is stricken by Satan, is sitting there on a hill. He's in the middle of a massive crisis in his life. Yet what is he doing? What is he doing? He's pondering the realities of God in the midst of it all. He's sitting here thinking about and talking to his friends, so-called friends, about the realities around him. Sure, he's got a massive skin disease of some sort. And he's in pain, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But he's not having to go through that as some sort of animal, trying to figure out how to deal with it instinctually. He can actually sit with his friends and talk about it. And more importantly, he can talk to God. He can talk to his Creator. And his Creator can talk to him. Animals may be aware of a Creator. I don't know. That's worthy of a great deal of debate as to whether or not the creatures that inhabit this world other than us are aware of God. They may be. I don't know. But we are. We know we are. And so we don't spend our lives sitting in this world trying desperately to figure out how to survive. We have been given by our Creator a very different realm to live in, one in which we have the opportunity to relate to our Creator. See, one of the greatest reasons that I reject the idea that we are nothing more than a species of animal on this planet is that very fact itself. The fact that we know there is a God who created all things. And the vastness and in the vastness of his creativity and the diversity of all that we see around us, the millions of species of animals all interlocked with one another in this planet. We have the opportunity to step back from that all and observe it, ponder it, consider it, and even speak to God about it. And that's true not only about the animal kingdom, but what's going on in our own lives as well. We have the opportunity to actually go to our Creator and say, why? How long, O Lord? Now again, we should do that not as Job has been doing it, or Job's friends have been doing it. We should do it from the perspective of, Lord, I would really like to know. Would you speak and tell me? But see, we have the option to do that. God brings all of these creatures into the presence of Job, and he says, you just don't get it, do you? You have been so focused on yourself, so focused on your own little problems, so inwardly, selfishly, narcissistically focused that you have not stopped to ponder for even one moment the things beyond you that I, the Creator God, have made. You see? It's a series of rapid-fire questions designed to demonstrate that we, as human beings created in the image of God, stand exalted under the ordination of Almighty God. Our lives are not just about surviving. They're about thriving in an intimate, personal relationship with our Creator. So right about here, it would be good for us to pause for a moment. Right about here, it would be good to pause for a moment and ask, how has God come to relate to us? And that will be the subject of next week's sermon. In the meantime, let us not lose track of the fact that our God has given to us an opportunity to thrive in His presence, to know Him, the one true God.